Adam,
Hello, sir.
it's 2026, and we're so back.
Baby, we are back.
Hello, and welcome to Revolutions of Our Time, the podcast where we analyze protests and revolutions, past and present, and we try to make sense of it all. I'm Sam, and alongside me, as always, is Bristol's favorite socialist. How are you, Adam?
There's a lot of socialists to choose from. I'm not sure that's the case. But doing
It's a
good.
high honor. Congratulations.
Thank you. Doing good. It's a new year. I have a desk that I'm recording from now rather than leaning on top of a piece of wood beneath a boiler, so I'm feeling professional. How are you?
At the end of the day, isn't a desk just us balancing on a piece of wood?
I suppose it is, yeah.
But I'm doing well. It's abnormally warm for January, which to most people out in the Southern California days is good.
Yeah.
But to me, it's a little bit worrying. Today is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. I'm celebrating it while it's still a public holiday. We'll see how much longer that remains. But yes, it is a bank holiday today in the U.S. So yeah, how are things in England, Adam?
I would say it's a mixed bag. Your party is limping on. They made it to the national conference, and despite some pretty negative press coverage, the actual members seem to be pretty enthusiastic about it. They voted on collective leadership. Polanski is doing very well, and it looks like there could be a Plaid Cymru, which is the Welsh National Party, Green coalition coming up in the Welsh elections, which would be the first time Labour has lost that ever, basically. On the other hand, very senior member of the Conservative Party, Robert Jenrick, has defected to Reform, and Labour is looking, it's much of the same, really, sort of
Right.
incompetent and unable to stand for much. But of the two sort of majorly ascendant parties, I'd guess those are the Greens and certainly the way the media talks about it, Reform seems to be the only one that might walk to electoral victories. But that's still a few years away. The next election is a few years away, so there's plenty of times for things to change. I took your question to be one about politics, since that's what we typically talk about.
Well, what are the vibes?
The vibes in most of the country were like, oh, there was a lot of snow last week. Didn't snow in Bristol, which was a bit of a bummer. I would say the vibes are mixed. I think people are feeling apolitical, a bit apathetic at the moment.
As is kind of the case with a Labour UK most of the time.
A little bit, yeah, a little bit.
But yeah, thank you for that UK update. Maybe we'll get into that a bit more.
How are the vibes with you?
Oh, vibes in America are way off, or maybe way on, depending on the trajectory we've been on.
Yeah.
We'll get into that in a bit. Every week, I kind of think it can't get any more chaotic, and then I'm proven wrong. But yeah, we'll get into that in a bit. Like I said, it is MLK Day, and I just wanted to say, socialist icon, Martin Luther King Jr., and I didn't realize that until, a few years ago when I began to educate myself towards that line of thinking. So to all of you out there, don't let anyone tell you that Martin Luther King Jr. was not a socialist. That was his main messaging of how are we going to get out of this? And the answer was always through collectivizing. Not whatever it was I learned back in school when I was 6 or 7, where it was just be nice to each other, right?
Yeah, and certainly later in his life, as I understand it, he became more explicitly kind of socialist as he went on.
In my experience, what I've witnessed is unless someone has nefarious intent, they usually tend to become more socialist the more educated they get in life.
Yeah, I think there's something to that for sure.
As well, I would like to give a shout out before we really begin our episode to the late, great Bob Weir, who's the guitarist for the Grateful Dead, who joined the band in 1965. He passed away last week. More of a politics and history podcast, but we've even mentioned, the countercultural hippie revolutions in America and the anti-war protests and everything, and the Grateful Dead were always at the forefront of that all. Over the last 10 years, they've been touring as Dead & Company, and I've been able to, one, get into that sort of culture myself, but also bring a lot of friends on board with me. Sadly, I was not able to take Adam to a show. It didn't ever line up time-wise, but whatever renditions there may be in the future, maybe he can get on board with that.
Yeah.
You can kind of see it in that every small town, even around the U.S., has a bar with a Grateful Dead night every week. And in San Diego, there's literally one you can go to every day, and with multiple on the weekends where there's a band playing covers of Grateful Dead songs. It's really easy to feel like there's not a lot of magic left in the world until you go to something like that. I just want to say a thank you to Bob Weir for helping me tap into that magic that is still out there in the world.
Rest in peace. You told me once that the sort of hippie aesthetic that we think of when we think of 1960s California is effectively the aesthetic of the Grateful Dead.
I mean, their merch guy invented tie-dye. There was also the famous LSD testing that Stanford University did when they invented the drug. And they would essentially host parties and invite unemployed hippies to test it out at. And the house band for these lab experiments was the Grateful Dead in 1965.
Interesting. Minor point of order. LSD was invented in Basel by Albert Hofmann, who tested it himself, took 8 times a normal dose, rode home on a bicycle, and noticed the buildings melt around him.
What was Stanford doing? Were they building on that?
Yeah, there was a lot of research in psychedelics for like mental health treatment in the early days of the drug, and I think a lot of that happened in the States. And then Nixon put a stop to all of that, basically.
Classic Nixon. But yeah, the music lives on, and so does that spirit of authenticity, that spirit of being yourself, that spirit of sticking it to the man. I encourage everyone to find that magic wherever they can.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's get into it. Today we're going to be doing a bit of a 2025 wrapped. We did a mid-year review. Now let's see what happened with the rest of the year. And let's talk a little bit about what might be in store for 2026. It's been a while since we've recorded, so thank you, dear listeners, for your patience. And in that time, I've rewritten this episode about 6 times because events keep happening and the world keeps spinning. So I'm sure this will be out of date within a week, but we're going to try our best. Let's run through where we stand now. Sort of the headlines that encapsulated the end of 2025 that followed us into 2026. The year started with kind of a bang in the U.S., and that would be ICE killing a U.S. citizen in cold blood. For me, in the States, I mean, we grow numb to like seeing the word shooting in the headlines, but for those of you living under a rock, in Minnesota, ICE agents shot and killed an unarmed woman who was in her car blocking the road, who wasn't really blocking it if you watch the video either. She was just trying to get away from them as they were trying to get into her car. Her name was Renee Good, and this led to protests against ICE that are still ongoing in Minneapolis, but this then led to heavy deployment of Homeland Security forces by the federal officials. At this point, ICE is going door to door in Minneapolis, just indiscriminately. And those videos are pretty scary and kind of reminiscent of some stuff in the past, right, Adam?
Yeah, for sure. So people like to compare ICE to the Gestapo in Nazi Germany. I was listening to In Bed with the Right, which is an amazing podcast that looks at sort of the rise of the right through gender politics lens. They're 2 academics out of Stanford, Maura Donegan and Adrian Dahl, who look at this. And they just did a series called Project 1933, where they went month by month comparing 2025 to 2023. And their first episode, pretty much of 2026, was talking about this incident with that context sort of in mind. And they actually compared ICE much more to the SA, the Sturmabteilung, that was sort of the predecessor to the Gestapo, who were basically just a bunch of thugs that would go around and beat up enemies of the state. Obviously, law enforcement in the United States killing American citizens is actually nothing new. But what I think 2 things to me really stood out about this horrific killing. One was the brazenness of it. It was, the cold-blooded murder of this woman was horrific. And then the defense of it by the establishment. J.D. Vance tweeting that it was self-defense and that she was trying to run this guy down when that clearly wasn't true. And it made me think of a George Orwell quote, which is, the party told you to disbelieve the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command. And that really stuck with me in this case.
It wasn't just J.D. Vance. It was Kristi Noem. It was the president, Donald Trump, saying that this man had been basically attacked and that he was in critical condition when clearly not the case at all. And like you said, it was just telling their base to believe a narrative that their eyes did not see. And it works. Because guess what, dude? Because I have my channels to that MAGA right via like extended family members, and they are spreading that narrative too. Like, it's wild.
Yeah.
So I guess, yeah, that I wanted to get those thoughts from you as an outside observer. And that's not the only person that has been killed by ICE this year. On January 15th, it was reported that Cuban migrant named Geraldo Lunas Campos was killed via asphyxiation. So the autopsy reports in his cell in an ICE detention facility in Texas. It's still early days on that reporting, but that's something that's kind of trying to be scrubbed. There's been a lot of deaths at their facilities overseas as well, but these are the ones happening on home soil. So it's just somehow increasing in violence when I didn't think that was possible. And we jump back to the UK in recent weeks, conservatives and reform alike saying that the UK needs their own form of ICE, right?
Yeah, which is interesting because I kind of wonder about this in terms of strategy, because part of me thinks, and I don't know that this makes it better or worse, or possibly neither, but part of me thinks that this is effectively engagement bait, because ICE is, well, one, extraordinarily unpopular in the United States. Really, really unpopular. Like, there are, of course, going to be some MAGA base who support it, but their approval rating is it's like 85% disapprove.
Mm-hmm.
And the structure of UK law, at present at least, is such that it would, whatever force did exist, would not really resemble what ICE is. I mean, God willing, and the creeks don't rise. But so I think that it might just be engagement bait, saying like, we need a British ICE, and then, you know, papers will talk about it and it'll become a headline or whatever, and that means that Farage is back in the news again. So what I like about him, he is a master of marketing in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing is, you know, immigrants have been a scapegoat in Britain for, I mean, decades, centuries perhaps, and visas were created by Britain specifically to stop Jewish refugees coming here from the Russian Empire in 1905. And so there's a long, long history of that. And I think that the kind of person who might be susceptible to believing immigration is a big problem in the UK might also be the kind of person who doesn't really understand what ICE is and what it does beyond the surface of description.
I think that's true. I think talking to some more apolitical people that I know in the UK, they don't see the videos of ICE being violent in the States
Mm-hmm.
or going door to door. That's not covered by BBC News. That's not covered by Sky News necessarily. It's not on the evening news in the UK. But what is on there is Farage talking about the need for ICE, a British version of ICE. So it really feels like most people that maybe nominally would support that in the UK have no idea what it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, immigrants have been the scapegoat a long time. I mean, you know, I think maybe we should send those Saxons back to the Danelaw. Keep Britain for the Picts, you know?
There's a political party in the UK called the Monster Raving Loony Party, which will inevitably stand a few candidates every year. And immigration platform in years gone by was, you've got to draw the line somewhere. So we'll deport anyone who cannot trace their lineage back to 55 BC, the Roman conquest of Britain. Anyone here before then can stay.
Yeah, we're going to be a nation of Celts again.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, some good news, Adam, in the U.S., which we know is that Mamdani began his term as mayor in New York City. He began that right away, sworn in at 12:01 a.m. on January 1st.
Mm-hmm.
See our recent episode on Mamdani's victory for more details on our immediate reaction to his electoral win. Some of his first acts included an executive order to plan city-run grocery stores and a bill for tenant right to purchase. Day one, he was like in a rent-controlled apartment, like looking at all the stuff that hadn't been repaired over the years. And he really is, so far, it's been a couple weeks, but so far, he's been putting his money where his mouth is. I like how he undid every single executive order that Eric Adams did after a certain date,
right,
immediately. Mamdani, with the help of the state government, has began some political battles with real estate agencies. So we'll see how that impacts New Yorkers later on. I think like we said before, we will do first 100 days.
Yep.
One thing I also wanted to highlight is that on January 8th, Mamdani, alongside New York Governor Hochul and Miss Rachel of YouTube fame and runner-up for Anti-Semite of the Year by that one organization.
Yeah, who won that? Was it Hassan Piker?
No, he wasn't even in the running this year.
Oh, right, okay, well.
I think Candace Owens won this year, yeah.
Okay, well, that's annoying because she actually is anti-Semitic.
Yeah. But alongside Miss Rachel, Mamdani announced universal childcare for 2-year-olds in New York City. That actually expanded to other parts of the state as well. So it wasn't just New York City. It was in partnership with the governor. And he promised to expand this in the coming year to apply to 3 and 4-year-olds. This was one policy that people saw as his most difficult one to accomplish, and he got it done on day 8. So
wow,
maybe socialism works.
Maybe. I wonder about the mechanism for that. I wonder how maybe that's something we could look at for the 100 Days episode about how this seems to have been a relatively simple thing to get done. Maybe it's that he had that backing of the governor.
Yeah, it seems that was the case. I don't know the nitty gritty details, but yeah, that'll be something we'll look into. For now, we will shelve it for the next 81 days. There's also been, sticking with the US, Adam, there's been just very, geopolitics has been insane. At the start of 2026.
Yeah.
And I think what happened was the CIA and the Pentagon sat down with Donald Trump and they said, here is our goal for this year. Like, here's our 365-day ambitions. And Trump just couldn't keep his mouth shut. And on the first press conference, he's like, oh, it's going to be a great year. We're going to invade Venezuela. We're going to take Greenland. We're going to take Cuba. It's going to be amazing. And like all at once, just all of a sudden. And I think the only explanation is that he was briefed on that stuff before, right?
Yeah.
And got a bit too excited.
That may well be, yeah.
Yeah, Venezuela's in crisis. President Nicolas Maduro was kidnapped in a raid by U.S.-backed paramilitaries. Trump claims it's, quote, liberation by the people, and he recognizes the opposition figure, who's the one that has recently given her Nobel Peace Prize to him.
Machado.
Yeah, which he's accepted as if he won the Nobel Peace Prize. He recognizes her as the interim president, even though the people of Venezuela do not. Massive pro-Maduro protests have erupted in Caracas and globally, denouncing this all as a coup, which is what it is. And Maduro was not necessarily the most popular guy, but he is now. Like, Keir Starmer is not popular, but if Russia kidnapped him,
yeah,
there would be British people in the streets, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I want to jump in. I am not sure that it is correct that Trump has recognized Mercado as the interim president of Venezuela.
That seems to be her ambition.
Yes, that is her ambition. The interim president is Delcy Rodriguez.
She's the one that is like the legal one next in Venezuela's
line of succession, yeah.
Yeah, they're not the ones that the U.S. would like to stay in power.
Yeah.
But yeah, Machado is the one that I think Trump also has ambitions for to take over. But it's clear that this is all just a coup, not by popular demand.
What's crazy about this one is, like, Trump just was like, yeah, it's for the oil. He just said that.
Yeah.
Like, we have to pretend that he didn't for some reason. Like,
it's so crazy because for those of you that remember Iraq, there was like a 2-year casus belli, build up of justification of like yellow cake uranium, human rights violations, petitions to the UN over and over again. We need this peacekeeping force to invade. Before they finally did. And even then, it was like never about oil, like rhetorically. It was always about like freedom and democracy. And it's funny because there are people in Trump's cabinet that remember that, namely Marco Rubio, who was giving a press conference alongside Trump, and he said something to that effect of, the Venezuelan people deserve democratic leadership and a cease to these sanctions and to be part of the free market. And then Trump just leans in, he's like, and they got a lot of oil. And it's like, and you could just see Rubio's face, he's like, shut up, dude. We're gonna make a lot of money on the oil. Our companies are going in. And that's clearly just all this is about. It's wild as well because the military remains loyal to Maduro and his deputy who is in charge, as you said. Usually that's not the case in a coup. Usually the CIA is a bit more organized, right? Yeah. In that they usually will choose their successor that is loyal to them, and the military is kind of paid off to to support that person.
Yeah.
This is the most sloppy coup. I mean, they did kidnap the guy,
Yeah.
which is wild. But like, other than that, it's the most sloppy coup I've ever seen.
For sure.
Other than that fake Turkish one a couple of years ago.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I forgot about that one.
But I don't know. What are some thoughts on Venezuela? Again, you're the outsider here. I'm the one sitting here from the imperial core.
Yeah, I mean, the brazenness with which it happened is what is astounding. The thing about Trump 1 is, like, ever since he entered the campaign in early 2016 or late 2015 or whenever it was, there's been a lot of debate about whether Trump is a fascist or not. And the one part of the definition of a fascist that he didn't meet, which some people thought of as important, was like imperial ambitions. Trump 2, that's all been stripped away. You know, he goes into the Oval Office January last year and immediately starts talking about Greenland, which, you know, we'll get to, I'm sure. And this incursion into Venezuela was quite nakedly imperialist. You know, they mentioned Maduro and drug trafficking, sure, but Trump personally pardoned ex-president of Honduras who was involved in drug trafficking. Mm-hmm. As we've said, kept talking about oil. Like, he kept making oil an important part of his casus belli, his justification. He was like, yeah, we're going to take their oil, deal with it.
Their justification is that they're not making enough money off of oil, and we can make more money off of their oil.
Yeah. I think that there were some in the European Union and other parts of the world who condemned this in strong terms. Keir Starmer notably was predictably wishy-washy about it.
He said, like, well, we do agree that Venezuela needs a regime change. And I'm like, who are you to say that another country needs a regime change?
It's really quite disgusting how he handled that, as he handles many things. But it really feels like the rest of the world is trying to cling to a sort of rules-based international order, which increasingly does not exist. Trump said not long after this, I'm not bound by international law, I'm bound only by my own morals, which was always true for the President of the United States, given the power of the country, but to come out and say it is
wild.
I wonder if it is an instance where, like, materialism breaks down slightly, because whilst materially that was always the case, it doesn't feel insignificant to say that. You know, like, it's
Well, when we live in an immaterialist world, then we are bound by the immaterial status quo, which is that the U.S. president is a buttoned-up professional who does not say the quiet part out loud. Yeah. That's the status quo.
Yeah, true.
We live in that immaterial world.
Yeah.
So he's just revealing it for what it is.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of, especially in Europe, a lot of idealists who want to pretend that the veneer is the truth. So all of this is just shattering their world, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned it before, but there was not just threats to Venezuela this year. There are threats to Greenland and Cuba, which I thought the Greenland thing was kind of behind us last year. That kind of just came out of nowhere again, where Trump tweeted out that he's going to renegotiate the purchase of Greenland and threatened tariffs, first on Denmark if they refused, but has since this week imposed 10% tariffs on basically all of Europe, with it increasing by like 5% every month. Until they agree to give him Greenland.
Yeah.
That's the most insane policy move I think I've ever seen. Like, I have a master's in modern history. Like, I've seen a lot of like weird policies, from like fascists to kings to... This one's up there.
Yeah.
Like, there's a few like Thai kings that have done some weird stuff, but like this is kind of up there in terms of the baffling shooting yourself in the foot effect it will have. Why do you think he's doing this?
I think Trump is very aware that he's getting towards the end of his life, and I think he's thinking about his legacy. I think he wants to be remembered as a conqueror.
He wants to see that big piece of land up there that is one color now. He wants to see it a different color on the map, and then people think, oh yeah, Trump did that.
I genuinely think that's the real reason. Now, there are others in Trump's cabinet that have been creating this agenda, and not even cabinet, but like advisors, the Heritage Foundation and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And their motivation for it, if indeed they are sort of involved, is more opaque. I think that because anything the US realistically wants to do with Greenland, they could do, right? Like, they could mine it, they could build big military installations, and that would have been very easy to negotiate with Denmark. If they hadn't been talking about sovereignty, Denmark would have been well up for it. I think there are potentially a couple of things going on there. One is that I think that there are those in the American far right who see Europe not as an ally, but as a potential threat. I think that this is the group that laud Brexit and are looking for potential other countries that might leave a European Union, as Europe as a sort of has the potential to be counter-hegemonic power, although it's been reluctant or incapable of taking on this role. And the other is, I think we also can't underestimate this is one of the few things that still sounds crazy to me, but
let me hear it.
The tech bros that are that have this overlap with the right in America genuinely believe that we need to that they are accelerationists. They genuinely believe we need to accelerate the end of civilization as we know it, bring about networked states, bring about post-human states of being. Sci-fi bullshit that sounds crazy, but that they do believe. Ray Kurzweil talked about like the post-human epoch in like 2005, and that became very popular. Curtis Yarvin, who's mates with Peter Thiel, talked about like the need for like the traditional nation state to fall apart and for these networked cities to emerge. And then Elon Musk said that was his aim at a Trump rally in the last presidential campaign. And I think that this destabilization that the US is going for is a part of this accelerationist agenda. Maybe. I don't know. It sounds crazy because it's crazy, but I can't think of any other reason why those who aren't Trump, who is concerned with his legacy, would be interested in bringing this about, unless they're also concerned with legacy and they just want to see the American empire expand for king and country.
Who knows, man?
Yeah.
I mean, what you're saying is that the fact that a handful of guys didn't get laid in college is leading to the end of the world. It's true.
It's true. Yes. There was an amazing Guardian article like 2 years ago, which was, the headline is all you need from the article, but it was like, I always knew I'd have to watch powerful men burn the world down. I just didn't expect them to be such losers.
It's true. And like, here's the thing is I'm picturing, because Spain, France, Norway, Sweden, Germany have sent troops to Greenland.
Yeah.
And they've said the Danish command has issued shoot first, ask questions later if the Americans do try anything.
The Netherlands and the UK have sent one soldier each.
I have heard that the UK has quietly offered itself as a staging point to the US. They're the ones that have not really condemned it.
This is the debate internally within Britain and the sort of pundit class in Britain, because Britain is kind of an American airbase floating in the North Atlantic. There are lots of American military bases here, and the worry is that America would use Britain as a staging ground for a Greenland invasion. And so what Britain's response to a possible American invasion would be has been of concern among the pundit class. But Britain has sent one soldier to Greenland, as has the Netherlands.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's his name?
I don't know.
It's Craig. Craig, you up for a mission?
I could probably find out.
I actually have seen that there are ads in British newspapers saying that if you served in the military and are under 65, you can rejoin.
Wow.
Which is pretty insane, right?
Yeah. It doesn't say their name. It just says a military officer.
Yeah. Okay, so obviously, like, you and I are both for a unified Ireland. I don't know your take on Scotland. I'm a pro Scottish independence guy myself, as an outsider looking in. Scotland has voiced their support for Greenland and Denmark. Mm-hmm. I have always been kind of on the fence if we'd ever see an independent Scotland in our lifetime. It would be the funniest thing if this was the thing that pushed it over and this was just the dumbest shit ever. You know?
Yeah.
Or like unified Ireland due to this.
It would also be, well, it would create many crises within the UK, that sort of omni-crisis that we've had ongoing for the past decade. But Britain's nuclear arsenal is in Scotland.
Yeah.
So what would happen to that in the context of a war is very interesting.
Well, hopefully Scotland follows the Hassan Piker model, which is, if you have nukes, don't give up your nukes.
Yeah.
Ukraine.
Yeah.
But anyway, so TBD with the U.S. war with Europe that no one saw coming a couple of years ago.
TBD.
Hopefully cooler heads prevail from this.
I have been wrong so many times. I think Europe's strategy will be to try and string this out until Trump dies. And they might succeed.
But I do think that if the U.S. invades, Europe will back down and go full Chamberlain Hitler mode,
I think so too.
But also, as this madness is going on, Trump just randomly tweets about finally solving the Cuba problem, quote unquote, which is like, what?
Yeah.
And in this situation, you can just feel the Soviet Union-sized hole in the geopolitical world, and you're just like kind of looking at China like, do something, please.
I know what you mean. There is a Soviet Union-sized hole. It's true.
Bro, they would not have kidnapped Chavez while the Soviet Union existed.
No, they would not.
So, yeah. The age-old question of, do you need a counter-hegemony? That answer is yes. Yeah. So, someone please call all the people debating that in the 80s and confirm.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll see what happens with Cuba. Hopefully nothing. Hopefully that's just...
I think Cuba's a more likely next target than Greenland, personally.
Oh, man.
Yeah. I think Cuba's an easier conquest.
For sure. But I mean, I was kind of talking about this with my dad. I was like, well, look at the 2000s. Europe kind of had to bear the front. More precisely like Turkey and Iraq, but Europe also had to bear the front of blowback from like US invasion of Iraq with like jihadists and stuff in Europe. But I was saying, imagine what happens if we start this in Cuba or in Venezuela. How safe are you going to feel at home? There's a lot of implications to all this stuff, which like the people at the top seem to just use as chess pieces in whatever game they're playing. But it's real people's lives. Yeah. So hopefully cooler heads prevail, but we'll see. We've talked a lot about the U.S., mainly the U.S. so far, but I think we will do an episode on Iran coming up. But I just wanted to mention that there have been wide-scale protests right now going on in Iran. And if you don't see your favorite leftist, content creators such as us posting in support of like all these protesters in the West for Iran, there is a reason for that. Much like Palestine over the last 70 years, democratic and socialist leadership in Iran has been eroded away, not just by their theocracy, but by the CIA, by Mossad. And there is no group right now in Iran really that's like ready to take on the mantle of like democracy or a socialist government or anything, which only leaves two options, right? And you see people, I've seen this. I've driven past massive protests here in California where they're waving the flag of the Shah. Yeah. And they all are like, they all look like ICE that are at these protests. And I'm like, man, either these people are just being paid. That's the only time I will subscribe to the paid protester model. Or they're just like really uninformed because they're flying the flag of a fascist dictator who will just give the resources away to Britain and the US. Yeah. Right. And that's what Iran kind of has at the moment.
Which isn't a conspiracy. That happened in the
No, yeah. That's not a conspiracy.
Historical fact.
I've heard some liberals in America in the recent weeks say at least Trump is supporting the protesters in Iran. At least he's doing one good thing. And I'm like, no, Trump is calling for the reinstatement of the Pahlavi family in power, which was the dictator for Shell and Exxon in Iran that systematically killed Kurds and Azeris and all these minority groups in Iran. And I'm not advocating for a theocracy here. I'm just saying that both options are terrible and it's best to stay out of this. And we'll get to it. I think there's a whole podcast to be had discussing this. But my take, and feel free if you disagree, is to like, let the people of Iran be self-determined in what their goals are and let that play out, because right now it's either a puppet dictator from supported by the US or a theocracy.
Yeah.
So what's your take?
Well, I suppose two things come to mind. One is a take that I saw from a journalist who I think is called Charlie McBride, leftist journalist, does a lot of short form content. Basically, he said that just as Palestine is a sort of an inconvenient issue for liberals in the way that it shapes out, Iran is inconvenient for leftists because the regime there is a theocratic fascist dictatorship. At the same time, they back these nationalist groups in Lebanon and Yemen and Palestine, who might be problematic in their own ways, but do offer liberationist sort of tendencies, liberationist goals. And the alternative is, as you say, a return to the Shah. So it's an inconvenient and really nuanced issue, which does require some careful thought and analysis. And I suppose that kind of, on your vein, in such an instance, the instinct is to go to the people who are affected by this. And I asked my German-Iranian friend whether her family was okay and how it was going. And she said, "We don't know, the internet's been disconnected." So that's a very tough situation, and it's hard to know what's going on under such circumstances. We absolutely will do an episode on that, and maybe it would be good to bring her on for that as well if she'd be willing. But yeah, thoughts of the people of Iran, and we'll dedicate a whole episode to that soon.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the tough situation. I'm not condemning resistance against this situation, but I am saying be wary of where and why the help comes from to this resistance. Because if you condemn everything else Trump does, then why would this be any different? Why would this be an act of altruism?
Yeah.
So more to come.
Yeah.
And hopefully more to come in a good sense. Maybe they make some progress. Maybe there is. I mean, because in protest movements, you do have leadership step up when it's needed most. So maybe we will see organization happen within Iran. And we don't know what's going on there. Like you said, the internet has been cut off there. One last thing I wanted to point at as sort of a current state of affairs before we do a little recap is the UK.
Yeah.
And that it's sort of criminalized solidarity. The videos that have been going on for the last 6 months of police carrying away elderly protesters, 83-year-old priests, from demonstrating in support of, more demonstrating that Palestine Action, which is a group for Palestine, has been deemed a terrorist organization, right? Or whatever they've been deemed.
Yeah.
That's where it's illegal to be affiliated.
Yeah, it's illegal to support them. Expressing support for Palestine Action, which for legal purposes I'm making clear that I'm not doing, can result in a 6-month jail sentence. This,
more than anything, kind of shows the state of the UK in a political sense, where the fact that the police dedicate so much resources to this also is just... At what point does that end?
Yeah. Well, there have been 4 hunger strikers in the UK since November who were arrested for supporting this cause. Went, I think, more than 70 days without food. Very, very nearly died. I and several others wrote to some MPs in regards to their action. And as a result, the British government did last week cancel a £2 billion contract with Elbit Systems, the Israeli defence firm, for them to train British troops. So the hunger strikers ended their strike, considering it a success.
Yeah, the mask is kind of off with Labour, right?
Yeah.
I sent you a thing the other day saying that Trump has selected Tony Blair as his the overseer of New Gaza, basically.
Yeah.
Which, he was Labour himself as well.
Yeah, well, he changed the Labour Party into a centrist party, and it's barely that anymore.
But yeah, so we'll see. As you mentioned at the top, British politics are taking a drastic turn, and the extremes on both sides. And I say extremes just being the more intense wings of these ideologies, one being a lot more nefarious than the other, but they are taking rise. You have the polar sides of the political spectrum rise in these situations where the center is falling apart. So we'll see what happens. But like you said, elections are a long way off yet. And I think with the Greens and your party, we'll see what happens. But they need to focus on consolidating and gaining support in the next few years.
Yeah. Tom Nichols released a video nearly a month ago called 43 Months to Save Britain, which is about the rise of Farage. So we're nearly at 42 people. So let's get cracking.
Yeah. Now, we had some elections that I just wanted to briefly mention. The first one I wanted to bring up, most of them were in October, around that time, but the Netherlands, you just want to comment as your former home, what this kind of means?
Yeah, so...
I'm not deep into this.
So the structure of Dutch politics is such that you will basically never have a political party win an election outright. You always govern by coalition. And this means that you can't make huge policy actions. The country is sort of run by civil servants in a way. Yeah, but those coalitions can often be very fractious. So the previous ruling party was the PVV, the People's Freedom Party, which was a far-right party headed by Geert Wilders, who is sometimes called the Dutch Trump, largely because of his hair, but he's actually more similar to Marine Le Pen. Bit more of a traditional far-right wacko, and he had this very weak coalition that collapsed in July last year. There were more elections in October, and pretty traditional centrist party was the largest party and formed the coalition there. So we've gone from a far-right anti-immigration party to a pretty standard centre-right.
Yeah, I think the reason I bring this up is because Wilders had so much momentum before Trump, I'd say, that like he had all these promises to like take it very extreme if he ever got power. And I guess it's like, while political stagnation is never good,
yeah,
it's good that he's no longer, like, he was not able to fulfill that mandate, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I wanted to bring up Chile as an interesting point because on the bright side, they have a communist mayor of their biggest city and capital who was reelected. On the bad news, the president of the country was elected as well as a very far right. So you got the duality of South America just taking place just within Chile itself. And I think right now, if you draw a line through South America at a certain angle, everything to the east is like socialist governments, and then everything to the west is like far right. And if you trace it back like 10 years, it was the exact same, just flipped.
Oh, interesting.
So yeah, South America is has a lot of whiplash due to US involvement over the 20th century. It's kind of an experimental ground for like a lot of socialist leadership that then gets stamped out by a lot of other stuff.
Yeah.
So good luck to Irachi Hassler, Santiago's communist mayor, which I think it's just anytime you find someone in power that outright is like part of a communist party in the West, it's just kind of interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
So I wanted to bring that
up. East. And Chile's got an interesting history of that. We'll have to do an episode on Allende someday.
For sure. Likewise as well, in Lisbon, in Portugal, there's also a communist bloc that won the plurality for ruling the city. And yeah, this kind of forced some radical housing policies. And yeah, hopefully if this project in Portugal goes well, we'll see maybe some inspiration across Europe. Portugal, I've heard described as the most East Europe country in Western Europe.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. Even European Portuguese sounds a bit Slavic. It's got a bit of a sh to it that Brazilian Portuguese doesn't have.
Yeah, no, I don't think I've ever met a Portuguese person, but I've met a lot of Brazilians. So the first time I heard Portuguese, like proper Portuguese, I thought it was like Romanian or something.
Yeah. It's in many ways it's the most Eastern European country in Western Europe. It's true. But Portugal's great. Yeah. I love Portugal.
I haven't been. I'd like to go. Supposedly my ancestry comes from there. According to my mom, even though we're from Mexico and not Brazil, which would add up to Spain. And also Nunez is a Spanish name, so I don't believe her, but I'd still like to go.
It's really nice. You'd really like it. They've got a big statue of Henry the Navigator, and they've got the Pastel de Natas, and Porto is very lovely as well.
Nice. Colombia, they have a far-left president, Gustavo Petro, who notoriously has been one of the only leaders to kind of rhetorically stand up to Trump. He's up for re-election in May, so we'll see if he can retain power or if it will swing the other way, as Colombia tends to do. Ireland, they elected a new president or prime minister.
President.
Would you like to talk about Catherine Connolly?
Yeah, so
you can kind of see Ireland from where you sit, you know?
Yeah, I suppose I suppose so. So Catherine Connolly is a left-wing politician in Ireland. She won by a huge margin, 63% of the vote. She was renowned for condemning the genocide in Gaza, and she is working to make Irish the working language of, I'm not going to be able to pronounce it right because it's an Irish word, but like the Taoiseach, the Irish Parliament. Though she was elected in October, and haven't heard much from, or early November rather, and haven't heard much from her then, to be honest. I before we recorded, went on Google News and typed in Catherine Connolly, and the only recent stuff is all pretty mundane. Like there's some stuff, she has called for urgent action as homelessness has jumped in Ireland, and then the rest of the stuff is like Leitrim's Organic Centre honoured to meet President Catherine Connolly during Sligo visit. Her campaign manager's going to run another campaign. It's all, pretty quiet.
Well, to be fair, I think from like December through January, most Irish people are in Spain. So we'll see. We'll give her a chance.
We'll give her a bit of time. Yeah, but high hopes.
Yeah. They're getting very sunburnt at the moment. Ryanair based out of Dublin. So they always got the good deals. Well, also, one thing that's sad about the Irish election is that they no longer have the most stereotypically Irish president ever.
Yeah.
In that if you Google an image of their former president, it's exactly who you'd picture if you thought of name was a whimsical leader of Ireland.
Oh, what was his name? His name was, he had a massive dog. Michael Higgins, that was his name. Yeah.
Old Higgy.
Old Higgy.
We hope he has a good retirement with his dogs.
Yeah.
The last election I wanted to talk about was Japan. Mm-hmm. And that was that the Liberal Democratic Party won the majority in their parliament. Despite the name Liberal Democratic Party, they are a far-right nationalist party.
Yeah, the Liberals are also the right-wing party in Australia.
And their leader, Sanae Takaichi, she took power in October. And I don't know if you've been seeing the news or anything around that, but she's already been posturing against China and Korea for like no reason.
Yeah.
I mean, Japan was way ahead of the game on like racism against immigrants in the 21st century.
Yeah.
Like that's their whole thing about robots, is they'd rather have robots than Filipino workers. But it's just posturing for no reason.
Yeah.
There's like these two islands that like no one lives on in between Japan and Korea that like have been contested in the last few weeks. And there's also, just posturing against China, just knowing that the U.S. has support because she's really good buddies with Trump.
Yeah, I feel like posturing against China is a fairly winning domestic policy in Japan, though.
Yeah, it's gotten pretty serious in terms of the day-to-day, like threats against Chinese tourists,
really?
Which is something you don't see often in Japan.
No.
Yeah, and they do have a huge working population of Chinese immigrants there. One thing that in the pop culture, the way this has manifested is like these K-pop awards. Most of them take place in Korea, but Japan also hosts a few of them at the end of the year. And there was 2 in Japan that were very big. And every mainland-born Chinese idol that's in a K-pop group was sick for these award shows. Like, quote-unquote sick. 10 of them all at the same time.
So they didn't
all from China. So it's just it's weird on a cultural level, this sort of aggression you see between normally cohesive powers at the moment, even though like ideologically and politically mainland China is quite different from Japan and Korea. There's a lot of business dealings, there's a lot of cooperation. Like I said, the biggest immigrant group in Japan is Chinese people. So just the far right on the rise, and it was worth mentioning. Now, let's talk about some protests. Mm-hmm. We did some episodes about Block the Dock, that movement in European ports to block aid to Israel as their ongoing genocide in Gaza was taking place. This expanded to Australia, which I didn't know until I had kind of done some research for this episode. But that is a good highlight of this year. And it signals that hopefully trade unions can see the power they have worldwide and what can be done in the future. Now, we mentioned in past episodes, like in our mid-year check-in, that Kenya and Togo had some pro-democracy protests going on at the time. Nothing good to say here. They were just violently suppressed by the state, unfortunately.
They were.
Serbia, we did an episode on that, and I don't know if you've done any further reading into this, but from what I've seen, other than some of the the resignations we've kind of seen at the periphery of their governance, there's not been a lot of systematic change, and the large-scale protests we saw last year have faded a bit. There still are protests, but not as much as before, and that a lot of the movement's momentum has kind of shifted towards more logistic means, trying to focus on the 2027 elections. Have you been seeing this as well?
We touched on this, I think, towards the end of our episode on it, about how I haven't looked much into it since we did the episode, but that was my feeling, in part because the president of Serbia, Vučić, that's right, has, I think, been quite successful in shifting the date. Then he said at one point that he wouldn't stand again in the 2027 election. We'll see whether he sticks to that word. It seems unlikely, but yeah, that does seem to be where the energy is moving towards, especially as we go into 2026.
Yeah, and the last movement, I would say, is like that Palestinian support and suppression has kind of hardened.
Yeah.
Like, we're at that tug of war, like I said, with the UK, where it's just sort of like when you watch these cops carry away these old people, it's just this very blank look on their face.
Yeah.
Like they're just done with it too, or it's just that's their job now.
Apparently police departments have had to have really serious meetings about morale over arresting these old people at protests for what is clearly an ongoing genocide, and how difficult they've found that. So I think that there is that hardening. At the same time, I think that for a sort of lay public, the announcement of the ceasefire, which has not meaningfully been a ceasefire, has eroded support, but not in an active way. I just think that the lay person who was upset about what they were seeing is now no more so, because they're like, well, there's been a ceasefire.
Yeah. Well, one guy that shout out to Ike Ndolo, a friend of the pod, who every day writes a new verse of his song in support of Gaza, and I think he's on day 160 now.
Wow.
So that is one person that has not given up.
Yeah.
So
God bless him.
Shout out to Ike. But yeah, and I think the only thing I've seen to or from in these sides is anti-BDS laws have been repealed in New York City because of Zoran Mamdani.
Yes, they have.
So some good news on that end.
Thank you, Comrade Zoran. I have one more protest I would like to mention, but I have been periodically interested in because they've been going on for such a long time. In Slovakia, protests against Fico, their right-wing president, who is good friends with Viktor Orban and indeed Vladimir Putin, have continued and continue to be very large. They keep getting larger. Big protests in December in Bratislava over changes to the judiciary there, which do not yet seem to have swayed things, but momentum does not appear to be slowing in the anti-Fico protests.
Well, I'd be interested in maybe hearing you lead us through a pod on that one day.
Yeah, sure.
We'll see how it goes. Yeah, shout out to the people of Slovakia.
Yeah.
Usually you don't hear a lot about the Slovaks doing as much protest as the Czechs, so that's
no
cool to hear.
Smaller population, but they've been doing a lot.
More conservative,
they've been protesting a lot.
Typically.
Yeah.
They weren't the atheist anarchists that the Czechs were. They were the Catholics,
No,
chilling.
And they're so Catholic that Father Christmas does not bring them presents. Santa Claus does not bring them presents. The baby Jesus brings them presents at Christmas. That's true.
Does he look like a Cupid cherub, just flying in to deliver?
I think he is just a baby who delivers presents, from what I understand.
He crawls in with the bow in his mouth and drops it off.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Shout out to Slovakian baby Jesus. Doesn't get enough credit,
I found out when I asked my Slovakian friend what they left out for Santa at Christmas, whether it was milk and cookies, and they're like, no, we don't leave anything because it's Jesus.
Anyway. Shout out to people of Slovakia. Now, I'll just very briefly touch on some conflict zones because not a lot has changed in the last 6 months. We did an episode on Sudan and the RSF and the UAE's involvement, and that is still going, that genocide, unfortunately. With no one listened to our boycott Dubai. They didn't take action on that, Adam. We tried our best, but there's only so much one podcast can do. Congo, a war over cobalt and copper escalates. Rwanda backing the M23 rebels that continue to push through eastern Congo. Maybe we'll talk about that. Well, Democratic Republic of Congo, not Republic of Congo. We'll talk about that one day, well, when the dust has settled. Ukraine is pretty much at a frozen standstill, but I will say that the ramifications of this has been NATO's 5% GDP military pledge, which more money to militaries means less money in social services generally. But that will probably be the lasting influence in places like Germany or France when we ultimately think about Ukraine. The Sahel, which for those of you who don't know, is that bit of land in between the Sahara Desert and sort of the savannas and jungles of sub-Saharan Africa. Typically a very turbulent political zone in the later half of the 20th century because of colonial interests, all of that good stuff. Our sort of friend of the show, Traore, is head of Burkina Faso, though in the past year has become less of a friend of the show because while he is an outright communist who seems to live by Marxist-Leninist governance, he also now condemns gay people, which is not cool, Traore. But also not cool is that they've formalized an alliance with the Wagner Group from Russia, who seems to be the one supporting their sort of military campaigns to get jihadists out of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. So I think Traore also falls under that category of inconvenient for leftists sometimes.
I was going to say, I think that this really does mirror Iran in some ways, in that, yes, there are lots of problems with this, and the Wagner Group in particular is a very nasty organization. But the Association of Sahel States, the Confederation, is an anti-imperialist measure that has like rejected the African Union because they see them as like a shill for the European Union and America. And actually, when you talk about the colonial legacy, a lot of that and what has made things more turbulent in the 21st century is the imposition of external European borders in African countries. For all we talk about ICE, Frontex is almost as nasty an organization. It just doesn't operate within Europe very much, but patrolling the Mediterranean and going throughout Africa. Like Europe's largest border is in the Sahel.
Which is wild. Yeah, and Traore himself is an inconvenient, kind of interesting character because there's so much of what he says and does that aligns with what we believe, but then there's so much that he says and does that doesn't.
Yeah.
He follows the Sankara model, and it's like, just stick to that, my guy.
Yeah.
You know, like, you're good. It is a tough position to be in when you posture yourself against the West entirely. They're going to take their assistance where they can find it, I suppose. Yeah. But that's not to say that we support contracts with the Wagner Group. So that's kind of the state of the world as it stands going into 2026. Are we in a better place or worse place than our mid-year check-in, Adam?
Overall, probably worse, with a few glimmers of hope.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. And I think if I had asked this like beginning of December, I'd be like, we're a little better. Zoran just won. Like, you know, there's some hope. And it's like, nah, Greenland, Venezuela, you know, all this just rapid fire ICE getting more brash with their killings and everything. So in the US, at least, it feels a lot crazier than last August. What about UK specifically? How are you feeling there? Like just within the UK, does it feel better or worse? I mean, the weather's worse than August, but other than that,
there are a few positive things around like rail nationalization. Some big like energy reforms have gone through that will ultimately like improve the UK's like renewable energy capacity and possibly ultimately make bills a little bit cheaper, but this has been very like underreported on. The erosion of civil liberties is very concerning, and that is very bad. And the Online Safety Act as well, which is suppressing free speech, is also a big concern. Keir Starmer's porn ban, as it's been called, but it's...
The reason I was keyed up to this, for those of you that are American and don't know about this, in the UK you now have to like scan your face to like go on a porn site.
You have to log
upload
in
your
with
ID
something
or
that
something?
has verified your ID. Yeah, so like you have to log in with Google with government verified ID or something like that.
The reason I was keyed into this was because Stavros Halkias was touring in the UK, and I saw a video being like, "What's up with you guys not being able to jack off now?"
Yeah, but it's not just like porn, it's also like information which could be like information about like abortions has been blocked. Information about gender identity has been blocked.
Why?
Well, the official justification is around safety of children and that their filter is not very good. The real reason is control and censorship.
So essentially it's like control to push like conservative values, essentially, like, oh.
Essentially, the official reason is to stop kids from encountering dangerous ideas, and harmful things like pornography. But the real reason is to do that for everyone. and ultimately to show that this isn't working, and then to block VPNs so that we can always be tracked online. Taylor Lorenz has done several very good episodes about this.
Yeah, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like a 15-year-old should be able to access information that could potentially be helpful to their health, right?
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that people aren't accessing this stuff. It means that they're accessing it on dodgier and dodgier websites.
Right, yeah. Adam, I have some quick fire questions for you for this year.
Yeah.
Quick fire.
Yeah.
All right, Adam, will the current Iranian regime fall due to the protests this year?
No, but I think they will be weaker and might at the next one.
Adam, will Venezuela be taken over by Western oil companies this year?
Yes. Or rather, Western oil companies will have an enormous foothold in Venezuela by the end of the year, I believe.
Adam, will the U.S. successfully annex Greenland this year?
No, I don't think so.
Will the U.S. launch military strikes on Cuba this year?
Yes, I think they will.
Adam, will the U.S. or France successfully topple the Sankara-inspired Traoré government in Burkina Faso?
No, I don't think so. I think they've got bigger priorities.
Adam, will the left retain power in Colombia?
No, I don't think so. I had to look into this one, but I think they haven't been successful in pushing enough legislation through.
These are tech-related questions. Will a major techno-feudal event occur, like a vital public service being cut off by a private tech platform?
Yes, I think that will be to do with either Starlink, Twitter, or Palantir.
Will AI cause catastrophic issues this year?
Oh, yeah. Oh, God, yeah.
Will the AI bubble burst?
Yes.
Will GTA 6 be delayed?
Yes.
Again, okay. Will a black market for Chinese RAM/hardware begin in the West?
Yes.
And the context for this is that computer parts are so expensive now because Chinese imports are blocked on this, basically.
Yes, I think that will emerge.
Will Japan successfully provoke violent clashes in East Asia this year?
No, I don't think so.
Will we see the first coordinated multi-country general strike of a gig economy?
No, too hard to organize.
Will Claudia Sheinbaum in Mexico maintain momentum as their leader?
Yes. Depends how cocky the US is after Cuba, but I think she will.
Follow-up question, will the US send troops to Mexico?
Oh, 50-50. Which is a horrifying thing to say.
Which will break first, the far-right's momentum in Europe or the European Union itself?
If Trump invades Greenland, the far right. If he does not, the European Union.
Will China invade Taiwan this year?
If Trump invades Greenland, yes. If not, no.
Will woke make a comeback?
Yeah, woke will make a comeback. I think we're seeing that happen.
Will companies pivot back to the woke aesthetic?
I think companies will pivot to an analog aesthetic. I think that's the next big thing that we'll see, which has some overlap, maybe, in an Animal Crossing sense.
Will Donald Trump die this year?
Yes.
Ooh, that's a big prediction. Will the U.S. have midterm elections this year?
Oh my god. Yes. But maybe not in every jurisdiction.
State. Okay.
State.
Will they have any impact whatsoever? Because the Dems keep saying, "Oh, we're waiting for the midterms. Then we'll show them."
Not immediately, but I think we will see a few more Zoran-style candidates win.
Will Islamophobia increase in the West?
Yes.
Will there be violent results this year for that?
Yeah, probably.
Like ICE will kill Somali American in Minnesota. That's my prediction, unfortunately. Will someone adjacent to Western politics be assassinated this year?
Yes.
Like we had last year?
Yes. Yeah, we'll see another Charlie Kirk this year, kind of thing.
Will Zoran be yelled at by the left for not being revolutionary enough?
Yes.
By the end of the year, will Tucker Carlson be the leading conservative voice worldwide?
No, that'll be Candace Owens.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. And finally, what's next for our show, Adam, to close us out?
Okay, so we're gonna turn that into an actual bingo card, and I have some thoughts next for our show. I want to do some deeper dives into things like Iran, like Cuba, Venezuela, maybe country profiles where we see turbulent things. I want to do a book club. I want to read the Jakarta Method with you, and then I want to read If We Burn with you, the Jakarta Method in particular, and I want us to do a diary series where we report back on our own attempts at IRL organizing and talk through how that's going and how to do it safely and as effectively as we can.
I like it.
What about for you? Any dreams, any wishes?
This year, I want to get back on track with our short form content.
Oh, yeah.
I want to start live streaming a bit on some of our outlets, so that way, while Adam sleeps, I can get us more followers.
Nice.
And I'm down for this, and I would like to see his perspective in the UK or something. But I would like to see us out on the street interviewing some protesters. I think we can get to that at some point as well. That's my goal for this podcast this year, and I think it's feasible.
Nice.
I'm glad to be jumping into a new year with you and with our listeners. And yeah, we'll see. We'll make a bingo card of all of Adam's predictions and see how it goes. Any final words for the listeners, Adam?
Thank you for listening, comrades. Happy New Year to you, 3 weeks into January. This year, build your community. Invite people over for dinner. Don't bother about tidying up too much first. Just cook something tasty and have them eat it.
Absolutely. I think that's a good note to leave us on. And Happy New Year, everyone. Whether it's 80 degrees Fahrenheit where you're at, like here, and sweating in your recording closet, or if it's a presumably rainy day.
It is a rainy day. It's like 7 degrees Celsius, which is 50 Fahrenheit, something like that.
Let the fire of revolution and the magic of music keep us warm. Thank you, dear listener.